Is Associate Professor of Exercise Science
For nutrition.
and Nutrition from Sage College, and going to speak about nutrition and exercise. Dr. Mitchell, thank you.
Thank you very much. Yeah, Dr. Hauser and I are in the same department at Sage. So we're both in the Department of Nutrition. I primarily teach courses in metabolism and sports nutrition, introductory nutrition. So today I'm going to talk about nutrition and exercise, and I think it's geared, perhaps to a little bit older audience, middle, maybe high school students, not necessarily on the elementary level. But there's probably things as parents, that if you have kids and as we're getting older and getting involved in exercise, these are kind of pieces that would be pretty important. So I'm going to talk, just about some of the dietary components that are important for athletes and thinking about performance. Then I'll spend some time talking about supplements, which is now a major problem, starting middle school, of course through professional athletes. And then I'll talk a little bit about body weight versus body composition, which you've probably heard some earlier, and I think, and also some of the points that Sonia talked about. We'll also stumble across some of these dietary ideas, sleep, the importance of sleep. So first off, just talking a little bit about, so as far as diet goes, for athletes or diets for exercise, I think sometimes athletes, whether they're amateur or even professional, although by the time they're professional they should know better, but at least as young athletes, starting in middle schools, with sports and of course high school, I think sometimes people think that there's such thing as a sports diet, and the truth is it's really the same foods that we suggest everyone eats to have a well-balanced diet. And the primary difference is that people that are very, very active, of course, need more calories. And I think getting that message even across to kids, even starting at elementary school, the more that we can encourage kids to have well-balanced diets and thinking about their different food groups. That's really the key message. And for performance, again, there's really nothing unique here other than the fact that we need some more calories, and selecting a higher percentage of carbohydrates in the diet will be important. But so for anyone to have extra energy, again, it does come down to calories, getting sufficient calories, and of course those nutrients. And of course, for an athlete or for someone that's exercising, of course, quality of workouts is also very important, of course. So, nutrient-dense foods. We talk about nutrient density, quite a bit. So, for example, starting to mention the idea, for example, Burger King or some fast food restaurant, you can quite readily get 1,000 calories, but how nutrient dense is that? Is that going to support the needs for an athlete? So eating often becomes very important, especially when we're talking about trying to get a lot of calories in. And some kids in high school, for example, if they're cross-country runners, spending quite a bit of energy. So eating often to meet their caloric needs is very important. Otherwise, again, not getting enough calories will be a detriment to their performance. So instead of eating once every 3-4 hours, eating maybe every 2 hours, be a grazer, right? And I think for all of us, that can help. And not getting too hungry before you have your next meal is a good way to make sure that when you do eat, you probably make better choices. So MyPlate, myplate.gov. This is that visual representation of what a plate should really look like. And I think if we can get kids to understand, especially athletes, that protein should not be 3/4 of that plate. And there are a lot of athletes that think that protein really should be half their plate, and they kind of neglect the fact that no, in fact that should only be not more than a third, or even this year makes it look like a quarter. But we are getting protein also from dairy, and that's also something to consider. But all these groups are important. And for performance, or for exercise, it's very important to kind of recognize the importance of carbohydrates. So grains really we would say that they really should be the foundation for a sports diet. So a little bit later, we'll talk about what paleo, what's the paleo diet, and some of the concerns with that. But in general, we would tend to say that grains, because of their high carbohydrate content, really should be the foundation of a sports diet. And carbohydrates are what fuels, especially high intensity exercise. The higher the intensity of exercise goes, the more reliance your body has on carbohydrate. So again, grains are important there. Whole grains, of course, are going to have more vitamins, right? More nutrient dense as compared to refined grains. And again, that's where, of course, schools, to the extent that schools can encourage the kids, maybe even as they're coming through the cafeteria line, hey, I know you're an athlete, I know you're playing soccer, why don't you pick, instead of picking, picking this, pick the healthier choice there. So we're looking again for whole grains. So again, why is that important? Again, the carbohydrate, again, is what fuels high intensity exercise. So without that, I'd say the primary cause of fatigue in exercise is when a carbohydrate in the muscles is depleted, right? So so again, getting students, even to think that, all right, well, if this is important, then maybe protein is really not the most important thing here. We will talk about protein. Yes, we do need some, but we don't need as much as people think. So, and again, when glycogen, which is how we store sugar in our muscles, when that's depleted, again, that's the primary cause of fatigue and exercise. So sometimes, like when kids say, oh, today is really hard, or this feels awful today, sometimes it's just because they haven't eaten well, and it's not that they're out of shape. Sometimes people think that they're out of shape. Like, oh, I haven't worked out for 3 days, I'm out of shape. For some reason, I can't perform. Like, well, you've been eating horribly. So that becomes really important. And then I used to say it to myself, it's like, oh, I had 2 days off the bike. I'm out of shape, right? I feel like you have to be on the bike 7 days a week, and if you're not, you're out of shape if you miss 2 rides. Okay? But if you don't eat well during those 2 days off, you're absolutely going to feel bad. So you're probably feeling worse because you haven't eaten. And so because of this, and this rapid depletion that can happen with high intensity exercise, it's really important that kids go back and eat really well. So whether it's amateurs or professional, it's really all the same. We have to make sure that we're getting back the carbohydrates to get our muscles refueled, so that they can go out there and do it again. Whether it's two workouts a day, or a lot of the stage athletes, for example, like in softball, for example, they'll have multiple 2 games a day. Volleyball, we'll play multiple games, and it's important, if they can replenish, to do so. Of course, another great part of our dietary plan should be fruits and vegetables, right? Especially some dark colors. Like, why the dark colors? What's the deal with dark colors? Why do we say?
They're more like higher nutrients and vitamins and
Higher nutrients, yeah, what kind of nutrients? Like what are the sort of things that we're talking about now, like the dark, all these dark colors? Yeah, the antioxidants, right? So what are antioxidants good for?
Reduces cancers.
Yeah, that's one of the primary things. There's a lot of other benefits that we can get from antioxidants, but cancer is one of those that we tend to push out the big message about fruits and vegetables. But they're also a great source of carb. They are a good source of carbohydrates as well, so that needs to be a component. And then dairy. Dairy is extremely important. Of course, what are we getting from dairy? I think we probably have a pretty good sense of that. Calcium. A lot of milk is fortified with vitamin D, and vitamin D also has a lot of some benefits that haven't identified for exercise. But again, calcium would be one of those important minerals coming out of milk. And then considering low fat or fat-free, I wouldn't say that's necessarily an absolute, but for those that may be thinking about saturated fat, the kind of fat that can lead to heart disease in the long run, one consideration is to consider moving to low fat or fat-free sources. So in terms of recovery, what can you do to help students recover from exercise? Like one of the things that I tell a lot of people is instead of grabbing something like a Gatorade after a hard workout, have a glass or two of milk. Right? Milk is perfect, right? Because milk has carbohydrates in it, and of course it has some protein. And so again, that can be I think a lot more effective. For example, again, just in a race bike for a long time, and you're always eating on the bike just a bunch of junk, basically, right? Because you just went a rapid carbohydrate source in the middle of exercise. So I always feel like I'm doing more damage to my body, and then I'm starting worrying about my teeth because I'm drinking Gatorade and I'm eating all these gels and all this sugar.
I had a question. What was the buzz out there, I don't know if it still is, about chocolate milk? Or is it just milk in general for recovery after?
Yeah, I think, I would say it's really just milk. Chocolate, of course, makes milk taste better to a lot of people.
Yeah.
So I don't really think the chocolate, to my knowledge, isn't really doing much of it, anything other than making the milk maybe taste better for a lot of people. Yes.
What if you have an athlete that's lactose intolerant or just can't have milk? What other supplements? Supplements, quote unquote. What are you looking for? There's water, obviously, but you're looking for something to replenish, or give that protein source or the calcium or.
Well, absolutely. Yeah, of course, you can get protein in a lot of different ways. Milk is just convenient for a lot of people, but like you said, if someone's lactose intolerant, then of course, having whatever a person likes, they could snack on some trail mix with some nuts, and nuts and dried fruits. Get a little bit of protein that way. Of course, having a sandwich, right? So it doesn't have to be milk per se.
Is there an importance of replenishing electrolytes after?
Well, yes, there is. And, so someone could say, well, I'm choosing Gatorade because I know I'll get the electrolytes back. So that's one of those things that, we do talk a lot about, sports drinks versus water. One thing that athletes can do if a workout hasn't been too intense and too long, meaning like over an hour, even 45 minutes can be intense depending on, what's going on. And for example, like in football, if a student's wearing a lot of pads and it's hot, even a 45-minute workout could be excessive where they need to replace electrolytes. So in those situations, water could work as long as you're eating some salty snacks and maybe salty foods. So those kind of situations, it's almost like a case-by-case basis where in a lot of cases, water can be okay as long as we're getting the salts back. Have a banana, right? Banana rich in potassium. They get your potassium back. Then again, you can salt your foods. I think for a lot of families, of course, there's encouragement to get away from a lot of processed foods. processed foods, of course, have a lot of salt in them. So if the kids are eating more or non-processed foods, it probably is very important that the kids maybe have some pretzels around the tin, right? Some salted pretzels that they can snack on. Again, if they're out there sweating a lot. So that becomes pretty important to get the electrolytes back. All right, this high protein myth. I have 2 students right now in a sports nutrition class that I'm teaching, and I just did a unit on protein last week, so on Monday, what is today?
Thursday.
Okay.
We're
so
spring break next week, we're like,
Yeah.
we're at our limit right now.
can't keep track, but so on Monday night, we were doing like a recap of, because we had these online discussions about protein and protein myths and how much protein do you really need to have, and 2 of my students that consider themselves bodybuilders, and so how much protein do you guys think? And when we say high, what is high? What do you guys think high is? I was astounded that they were talking about getting, let's see, they said 50% of their diet has protein, but they were talking about like 400 grams of pure protein, which would equate to 1,600 grams of protein foods, right? Which is it's almost 4 pounds of protein foods. And I said, well, how do you even consume that, let alone it not be a good idea? But how do you even consume, 4 pounds of just protein foods? Well, I wasn't surprised by their answer. Of course, part of that's from protein shakes combined with foods, but I said that has to be like ridiculously expensive, right? Not only is it a bad idea for the body, but just in terms of just practicality, I just couldn't believe it. So when some people say high protein, that's really what they're talking about. And a lot of middle schools, it kind of starts very early. Everyone thinks to get bigger, I need more protein, right? And so dispelling that myth, is very important. We said that you absolutely do need adequate protein to build and repair muscles, but at that level, that's a bit much. So, there are there are limits on the amount of protein that we should have in our body. And you think about kids' kidneys could be a little bit less mature as well. What's the concern with excess protein? You know what some of those might be?
Isn't it bad in kidneys? Doesn't it get stuck basically in kidneys?
Well, proteins have nitrogen. Some of the building blocks of proteins, they have nitrogen in them. And so nitrogen can be toxic to the body. Hence, that's why the kidneys dispose of the nitrogen, and so it does make the kidneys have to work. But yes, nitrogen is toxic, and the physiology is understood pretty well. But that is the primary concern, and again, there's the cost factor there. It just becomes kind of impractical. And I think what people don't understand is that as an energy source for exercise, we're only talking about 5 to 10% of energy needs during exercise are coming from protein. Most of those needs are coming from fat and carbohydrate. So protein, again, is only 5 to 10% of energy needs for exercise. Now that's an important 5 to 10% to kind of help maintain blood glucose levels. So because you can convert the amino acids, which are the building blocks of protein, to glucose, right? And help the body, help the liver keep supplying the body with blood glucose to get to like the brain, your heart, other organs that need that sugar. And then we can't store protein. Our bodies don't store, right? If you eat excess protein, your body doesn't store it, right? It gets converted to fat. And then we have to get rid of the nitrogen because we don't store we wouldn't want to store the nitrogen. So I think sometimes, again, really came down pretty hard on those two. and I think they kind of felt my wrath about what they were doing, but because I didn't want the other students in the class to come away with this impression that this is what we should be doing, and so I'll say it quite straightforward. Well, yeah, all that excess protein, if we can't use it, for what the body needs to synthesize, yes, we do. There is some muscle repair, but beyond that, excess of anything can get turned to fat. And so when students are asking me about, well, how can I improve my body composition because I want to be a bodybuilder, then, well, maybe we need to look at those 4 pounds of meat that we eat. Maybe that's a problem. It's amazing. But this is one of the biggest, most consistent pieces, I think, like when you talk to athletes, again, starting young, that they all, I think, by and large, most of them are in this regime. Okay, so the question is, so how do you get bigger and stronger? I think, what's the answer? How do you really get stronger? Yeah, exercise, right? I mean, there's no magic, right? It's just, work out, and have a good balanced diet. So keep the carbs coming, and that should be the primary fuel. But again, we can't discount the fact that yes, protein is important to have those adequate amounts, because clearly, if you don't have enough, that will impair muscle growth, and getting benefits from working out. Definitely be impaired in adequate amounts of protein. So, we really would say then, protein should really just accompany your foods. All right? Shouldn't be, again, half the plate shouldn't be a piece of steak, and then, with a bunch of potato chips or something, right? Maybe it's pasta with a little bit of chicken in there, rice or couscous or something another, and then using protein as an accompaniment. And thinking, getting people, I think the sooner that we can get, students to think about greater variety of protein sources, right? And if it's not milk, people can be lactose intolerant and not able to drink milk. But as far as protein goes, meat is not the only protein source, right? And of course, so there are vegetable sources as well, and it's just a matter of how do we do that with vegetables? We'll talk about that in a moment. But healthier protein foods. So what for some of you, what would healthy protein look like for some of you? Tofu is one of the few vegetable sources. Soy, a complete protein source. However, beans can be a good source, especially when combined with grains. So we'll talk about complete proteins maybe here in a second. But with meats, of course you have eggs, fish, great source of protein. Lean cuts of meat. Right? You can rotate lean cuts of meat through the diet, rotate beans through the diet. Think about incorporating soy. Right? So getting students to appreciate that, again, it doesn't just have to be a piece of steak or just red meat. Again, it can be all of those things, but I think the more that they try to think about rotating these through their diet. So we mentioned soy, as some other sources, not just meat sources or animal sources. Vegetable sources are also an option. And what's the difference between animal sources of protein and vegetable sources of protein that we might point out in nutrition? Where are some of the key differences there? Vegetable versus animal sources. Okay, so complete versus incomplete proteins. What's that mean? What does it mean to be a complete protein?
Has all the nuances that you need.
has all the amino acids that we need. Yeah, so we would call those the essential amino acids. As long as we get 9, our body uses a set of 20 amino acids, but 9 we must get in our diets. We call those the 9 essential amino acids. The proteins that are complete supply all those. So eggs, fish, your animal meats, absolutely. Soy is a complete protein source. Most other vegetables and grains are incomplete, meaning that we're missing one of those 9. So, yeah, so we would talk about mutual supplementation and to acquire then a complete protein source, where, for example, combining grains with beans or legumes would be, whereas grains will be missing one or two essential amino acids, they, however, will have the ones that perhaps beans are missing. The beans will be missing 1 or 2, will be picked up by the grains. Combining those, rice and beans, for example, a lot of cultures around the world have exploited rice and beans and rice and legumes for a long time. Right? So, peanut butter and jelly, right? Peanut butter, nuts alone aren't a great, they're not a complete protein source, but combined with wheat bread, that's a complete source. And it's cheap, right? I think a lot of parents a long time ago discovered that PB&J, although a student reminded me that cost of peanut butter is going up.
That you can have it.
Yep, okay, so yes, we have these allergies and now our concerns too. So, yeah, those are absolutely some concerns. Who likes hummus? Yeah, it's so good stuff, right? So, pita and hummus, right? Be a great source of protein. So there are lots of examples that, for this mutual supplementation that, again, if you just get, especially with vegetarians, it's a concern to make sure that they are, in fact, getting an adequate protein source. So this whole subject is really pretty key. I always like this saying. I'm not really sure, trying to find out who really came up with this. Does anyone know? Anyone ever heard this saying? Breakfast
This morning.
Breakfast like a king? Oh, yeah? How about that? It must have come from do we know where that saying actually came from? It's been around a long time, but
At one time I knew. I'll have to jog my memory here.
I did take a look to see if I could find it, but never really could find out where it came from. But I think it's a great saying, right? There's so many people, that don't eat breakfast, right? I think it's important for little tykes all the way up through, older adults, right? We really should be eating breakfast like a king, right? And dinner, can be an afterthought. And so I think that in this country, our priorities sometimes tend to be, more so on dinner, right? That's like the big family meal in the U.S. Whereas in other cultures, dinner is sometimes served at 10 in the evening, and it's more just what we might call snacks, right? But maybe healthy snacks, but for high energy, to have more energy starting off the day, right? We know that for little kids. Yes.
A quick question. I have 2 little ones. I have a 10-year-old, 7-year-old. And every morning it's a struggle to get breakfast in them before school. And it's not that they're just not hungry. They wake up not hungry. Obviously, do you feed them before they go to bed to keep that, I know that, you don't want that, I know that.
Well, sometimes we say that. Sometimes.
They wake up not wanting to eat.
Yeah. Well, sometimes, one of the things we say is sometimes when kids can't eat in the morning, it's like with college athletes, sometimes they're staying up till 12, 2 in the morning, and they're eating, that late in the evening, and that's why they're not eating breakfast sometimes. I think with little kids, let's say that with maybe some of the high school kids and college athletes is that, again, they're eating late at night, and that's really just destroying their appetite for the morning. And, so we suggest, all right, let's get away from eating so much at night. For little kids, maybe just sending them out the door, maybe a bagel and maybe some yogurt, just something that they can eat on the go.
Yeah, we're definitely not eating like a king. They're eating bars. They're eating, we do protein shakes. Try different things to get them, full before they leave the house. We think full, but they're like, well, I'm not hungry. I don't need to eat. yes, you do.
Yeah. Yeah, because, what's the reason why we really do push breakfast? Breaking the fast, right? So, our liver, it's not that big, right? Our liver's 3-4 pounds. That doesn't really store that much sugar. So during that fast, all that sugar, which is supplying our brain and a number of our organs, and especially our brain, to get that sugar, keep glucose going to the brain, keep our nerve cells healthy, that liver's depleted by the time the morning comes around. And that's the concern, especially for little kids, and I think for any student, is to be able to learn, the brain needs fuel. And so we need to break that fast. For athletes, as far as performance goes, the muscles could be potentially fueled from having eaten well, for the days leading, let's say, up to the day of competition. But that liver, again, will be depleted overnight. And again, if the head is, if the nervous system is, if the brain is not, fueled, again, the muscles can feel good, but then, their ability to focus, getting irritable, during an activity, and all those things can happen. So I guess, think about your question though with little kids, I don't know, that's a tough one. And some of you may have some thoughts on that. I don't have little kids. How do we get at that? One of the things that will help college kids is,
I get it in my own ones, and I get it at school too. When kids come to school, they're like, "Oh, I didn't eat breakfast this morning." I'm like,
Oh, yeah.
You didn't eat breakfast, So
The only thing I want to say, I don't have a definite answer because I'm not a believer in pushing food if a child is not hungry. That's another conversation. But eat when you're hungry and stop when you're full. But when my son was 3 or 4, he just would tell me he's not hungry. And then we decided to just go with the non-traditional breakfast. And if he wanted the spaghetti and meatballs from the night before,
Right,
fine,
yeah, sometimes.
that's so be it. And then he got into this kick where he wanted tuna fish sandwiches. And like I had to make the tuna fish at 6 in the morning.
Before you go to school, right.
A mom does what you have to do, but I think it's important that it as long as it meets the criteria of whole grain, quality protein, it doesn't matter what it is. It doesn't have to be.
Why does it have
you know,
to be pancakes or have to be
Right,
cereal?
it's all about the
Yeah.
non-traditional breakfast.
it could be pita.
And he taught me so much, my son,
that.
when I decided to just, right, it doesn't have to be.
Isn't that where breakfast pizza
Yeah.
is?
Yeah, exactly. So just, what do they want, as long as it meets the criteria?
Yeah, and one of the criteria that we would say is, the more food groups you can get in there, maybe at least 3 food groups. Right, so instead of just having, carbohydrate, try to incorporate, maybe some fruit, get some dairy in there. Again, dairy can give some protein. It could be a yogurt smoothie. Right? That's again, it's quick. Now the calories, we have to think about the calories because usually, to be able to eat like a king, part of it is just really boosting up those calories. So instead of just having 1/8 of your calories in the morning, you want to the more that you can get people to eat consistent. If you're eating 3 meals a day, 1/3, 1/3, 1/3, eating 4 meals, trying to get consistent number of calories across the board. So, but the most important thing is, and again, I think like you said, dinner, leftovers. If they really like it, and that's what they want to eat it, there's nothing wrong with that, right? Because there's no magic. Different cultures around the world.
Eat fish for breakfast.
Yeah. Or they may eat, beans, right? A lot of legumes in other cultures. So, yeah, there's nothing magical about, cereal or pancakes, like you said, or waffles. But the key thing is, got to eat breakfast. Now, just quickly on special diets, paleo, that's become like a big thing in the CrossFit community. And, what's the idea? Well, in Paleolithic era, there was more, reliance perhaps on hunting and a lot of meats, no refined grains, right? That's understandable. My concern there is, well, what about whole grains? Presumably there were some whole grains, around during that era. So I don't fully understand like the whole premise there, because cutting out could be cutting out a fair amount of carbohydrate, and fruits, of course, that diet can allow for fruits and vegetables, of course, but that's, yes, I'm not going to say much more than that about it, but we know it's in the CrossFit community, and we had some graduate students, we have a newsletter that we write for the Sage athletes, and this is one of the topics that we picked up and really just emphasized, yes, we understand that piece about taking out the refined grains because they wouldn't have been around at that time, but whole grains, really, I would believe they would have been available, right? So, and again, we're likewise then missing some important B vitamins by taking out the whole grains, and there's some, again, we said there's some protein in some of these, well, grains do have a little bit of protein, so there's a lot that's being taken out by that diet. Gluten-free, and like for students that have celiacs or gluten-free concerns, then it's really a matter of thinking about what can we do to make that diet still work for an athlete. Right? Baked potato, like a whole potato, as opposed to French fries, is a good source of carbohydrate, right? And gluten-free. Yeah, and some potassium. Yeah, so there's a lot of there are some choices that can be made, and it's just something that we should absolutely keep in mind. So we're seeing more and more of this. Right? Again, more students have allergies, gluten-free, wanting to do different diets. All right. I'm not going to say too much about lunch. I do want to, I kind of think about the time here. I want to say something about supplements, because this is actually the area that is, like I said, one of the bigger concerns right now. So ergogenic aids, these are performance enhancing supplements. And what does the U.S. government say about supplements? There's not a lot of regulation on these, right? So companies can make any claim that they want. And of course, young people, buy into those claims, and they probably have looked at the Incredible Hulk reruns, right? And they all can look like we've written them. So, so these are major concerns, and contamination of supplements. So when people are using protein powders and amino acid supplements, for example, they likewise can be contaminated with things like potentially steroids. So a lot of athletes get busted for doping in sports because they'll claim that, well, I was just taking this basic supplement. Right? Well, it's contaminated. So that's something that, especially...
How can it be contaminated if the
That depends on the...
illegal?
How can it be contaminated?
Yeah, it's not
Instrumentation. The same machine, the same instrument that was being used to synthesize, some anabolic steroid could have been repurposed to synthesize some supplements, right? We try to clean it, fairly well in between use, but if it's not done, trace contaminants will show up. And that's been claimed, by a lot of cyclists, for example. Right? Cycling is horrible. But so within the college ranks, then, who's setting the standards? The NCAA, World Anti-Doping Association, the U.S. Anti-Doping Association. Of course, they put limits on these. Within the high school level, then we have the National Federation, state and high school associations, and they simply say that they oppose the use of these. So for high school coaches, this high school probably would be the big target, for really needing to dig into, what some of these advisories are. But within the schools, and as parents, there needs to be a lot of dialogue about discussion, about these sort of things, because this is dangerous, right? It's very dangerous. And it's even more dangerous than as kids, because their bodies are, of course, much more vulnerable. So in terms of percentages, these are some interesting, stats here. So 5% of middle and high school students have used anabolic steroids. All right, talking about 5% of a big number. That's a lot of people. All right. So, and it's not just boys. It's boys and girls. So, and then also non-steroidal. So it's not just steroids. These things that we may hear about a lot to help build muscle. But it's also some of the non-steroidal supplements. Creatine, maybe some of you have heard of creatine before. Yeah, but we're talking about a lot of people. So yeah, this was, as it says, from this Fox News report 2012, and this data is coming from a study amongst a lot of schools in Minnesota. Creatine then is one of those most widely used supplements. How many of you have heard of creatine maybe like in your schools, right? Heard about it in the schools? Any discussions? In the gym? Yeah. We've got people asking about that kind of stuff all the time. And the availability of these substances is very available. It's not hard for people to get, like on the internet and in the locker room.
Even a lot of gyms, that make protein shakes and things like that.
Yeah, like GNC, right? It sells a lot of these kind of supplements. So, yeah, so again, so creatine, what's, teenagers, kind of the larger, the larger groups that are actually using creatine is coming from that population. What does it do for the body? Anyone know? Like why creatine?
Does it repair muscle faster?
Not necessarily repair muscle, but
Build muscle?
well, it can allow an athlete to we would say like to do more hard efforts, like more intervals. If a person can only do 5 hard intervals, let's say you're doing 30-second efforts, or maybe you can cut that down, like 10, 15-second efforts, or like in powerlifting. So if a person, let's say, can only do, let's say, 8 hard efforts, with extra creatine, it's been shown that they can do more of those hard efforts. So the recovery, the ability to recover and do more efforts, and hence get stronger that way. And so that has been shown there are those benefits. But for some of those long-term and short-term effects have not been studied in kids. All right, it's been studied in adults, but not in children. And so the American College of Sports Medicine then recommends that no one under the age of 18 should use creatine. But obviously they are. So caffeine and energy drinks. So we talked about energy drinks. Yes, we know that's another, Red Bull, Rockstar, Monster. They're all kind of cool sounding, right? And but they're not sports drinks, right? They're loaded with caffeine. That is a stimulant. There's a lot of benefits that have been shown. Yes, it does work as claimed. But in kids, kids are the side effects from caffeine, that we get as adults are just exacerbated in kids. So that's the danger from those. Yeah, so energy drinks can have a fair amount of caffeine in those. Again, a lot of side effects, in addition to problems with the heart, hallucinations, potentially convulsions. And those would be more as particularly true like in kids that may be on other supplements or medications. So you really should be watching these sorts of things. Again, they're not, even though kids watch X Games, and I like the X Games too, and half the athletes are either monster athletes or supported by Rockstar, or those are the two big ones. Rockstar and Monster supports a lot of the X Games athletes. They're not sports drinks. And, so beware. I'm going to jump past some of that. Well, protein supplements. This is, one of these other topics, which is a lot of kids again use protein and amino acid supplements. Do they really work? Yeah. Yes, there can be benefits, but in metabolism, we talk a lot about absorption. Are they really absorbed at the same level? No. Do they really help to build muscle? Not necessarily in the same way. So they can be expensive. They're convenient though. That's why a lot of people turn to it, right? They can get in they can get in a lot of grams of protein potentially faster than they could with an equivalent amount of food, right? But contamination again could be a problem, and are they really effective? And for the most part, well, not for the most part, but kids can do a lot better, by eating food. All right. All anabolic steroids are banned, and human growth hormone. We even have students using human growth hormone, right? Females, for example, wanting to change their body shape. All right, so when we talk about steroids, again, it's not just boys, it's girls too. It's body image, right? Boys wanting to get bigger. Maybe bullying is a concern. A lot of boys want to get bigger, girls want to get smaller. And so growth hormone and some of the anabolic steroids are used for those purposes. A lot of bad effects. Just some more stats, and I'm probably going to go ahead and cut it off here, kind of looking at the time. I know that we can kind of turn to questions. There's some other pieces I would like to go through, but maybe in consideration of time, we'll kind of cut it down. But yeah, we're talking about a lot of people, using these, a lot of kids using these compounds, right? It's amazing to me that even 8th graders would be using steroids. Seems kind of crazy. And these percentages, this is 2002, and some of the more recent stats take this up to as much as high as 4%. But again, just the thought that 8th graders would be using steroids is just amazing to me. Girls, 1/3 of all steroid use in high schools. So again, it's not just the boys. Yeah, what do you know about some of the harmful effects? Maybe I'll kind of end here. But what do you know about harmful effects?
Your heart.
It could be concerns with the heart, or the
Liver.
The liver. Yeah, the liver is where we detoxify a lot of medications and compounds in our body. Studied growth. I think boys probably wouldn't like to think that their testicles might get smaller, right? I think if we, and maybe in a health class, if that message is put out there, it would help the boys to stay away. Girls can have menstrual have problems, right? Because these steroids have, we have in our bodies naturally we have testosterone. Males have testosterone. Females have a little bit, but and so these anabolic steroids, which are derivatives of testosterone, then impact the hormonal system quite a bit. So stunted growth, roid rage. Who's heard of roid rage?
So we just got the case in the gym. The guy actually died. He went into an absolute
at
rage.
Penn?
He went into cardiac arrest, and they changed it over a bunch of times too. And he was on some type of thing. So it's hard to get out.
Yeah. So that is one of the one of the serious side effects is like that increased aggression. Some might think, well, that's great for football. I need my football players to be more aggressive, right? But
Yeah, right.
But not at the expense of your life. Right? So, any kinds of questions? Body composition and body weight versus body composition. How do you deal with it? Maybe you kind of talked about that a little bit, but with kids, one of the other things that we really need to think about, like with kids, is like for certain sports, body weight is talked about, right? But is it body weight or body composition? That's more important.
Usually more the body composition. You think about doing a mirror test, it doesn't matter what the BMI says, what do I look like when I look in the mirror? My firm, my solid, when I stop, does my body keep jiggling, that type of thing? look
Yeah,
at,
well, body mass index, you know, is a, yeah. Okay.
that's one of those things in a health class we have issues with, is that you sit there, you look at two kids, you go to a wrestling match, you know, the heavyweights get on the mat, and they're both about the same weight. One kid looks like, you know, chilled out granite, the other kid looks like the Pillsbury Doughboy. These kids, are- from a BMI standpoint, they're the same. That becomes an issue, trying to explain that to kids.
That's, yeah. And I think the more that kids can understand that it's body composition, I think, which, you know, we can talk about, but we gotta be very careful talking about body weight.
And we use, you know, BMI as part of that report card we
And
use.
BMI
Sometimes it's a,
is a tool.
yeah.
Yeah, but percent body fat, high percent body fat above optimal is definitely correlated with poor athletic performance. So the more that, you know, if we're going to talk about body weight and or body composition, the emphasis should be on body composition and understanding that, well, agility is related to, you know, having, you know, a stronger body composition, which tends to mean less percent body fat, you know, more relative to muscle. And then how do you get more muscle? How do you change the body composition to make it more optimal? What kind of exercise should be done? That's probably what you heard this morning. What's the best kind of exercise to optimize like the body composition? Endurance or resistance? More of that resistance type exercise, right? That high intensity exercise is going to improve body composition more than would endurance exercise. So, all right. Any questions again at all? Because I think we need to get moving to the next speaker. Oh, there's lunch. Oh, well, lunch I think is even, we need the energy, right? So I still got 2 classes.